This is TV Podcast Industries, and we're talking about The Boys, Season 1, Episode 7, The Self-Preservation Society.
You don't understand. The thing about crossbreeding dogs, you get the right genes, you can get a perfect creation. But it doesn't matter how perfect they are. It's not enough. When I raise subjects without their mothers, they become violent, aggressive, downright hateful. You should have been raised in a home with a family who loved you, not in a cold lab with doctors.
And yet, I turned out great.
When I think what it's done to you, and what you can now do to everyone else. I'm sorry.
I don't want your apology.
All this is my fault.
What do you want? What? What do you want? Forgiveness? Now? After you raised me like a lab rat? Too little, too late.
I don't want anything from you, John. I'm just an old man thinking about his mistakes.
I'm the world's greatest superhero.
You're my greatest failure.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TV Podcast Industries, where we are talking about The Boys, Season 1, Episode 7, aka The Self-Preservation Society. I am one of your hosts, Chris, and I am joined by my illustrious Supes in co-host and podcast superior something. I couldn't figure it out as I was talking, but I am joined by two of the best men in the world. Gentlemen, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Why, thank you, Chris. Yes, I am one of your other podcast hosts, John.
And I'm your other co-host, Derek. I'm currently preserving myself with lemons.
I'm preserving myself with gin.
And I'm preserving myself like a pickled fish, much like the deep.
Nice.
But I'm jumping ahead of myself. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us with TV Podcast Industries. We are here, and we want you to pop over to our website at tvpodcastindustry.com to leave us a quick voicemail and feedback on what you thought of The Boys Season 1 as a whole, because obviously the next episode is our finale. We are here for our penultimate review of this season. So make sure you jump over and leave us a voicemail or send us your thoughts and feedback at tvpodcastindustries.com. Or why not jump over to our Facebook group, TV Podcast Industries, and you can join us and talk about The Boys or any other shows that we cover to your heart's content along with everyone else. But make sure you also subscribe on any Supe or non-Supe Boys or non-Boys podcast player, and make sure while you're there to give us an old review, a like, subscribe, share, etc., etc. I really want to get in and talk about this episode, so I'm speeding through our intro.
You certainly are. Quick question, Chris.
Uh-huh.
So do you call girls non-boys?
But gentlemen, I am dying to discuss this episode because it is our penultimate episode, not of TV Podcast Industries coverage, but just of The Boys Season 1. So, Derek, do you want to give us your thoughts on the episode details for this?
Absolutely. You take a breath there, Chris. We'll take a couple of minutes on this one. This episode was written by Craig Rosenberg and Ellie Monaghan. This is the first episode that we've got two writers on the episode. Ellie Monaghan has been a writer's assistant on this show and on Mr. Robot as well. So, been working a lot in the writer's room. So, this is one of her first major credits for a TV show though as well. Craig Rosenberg, we talked about him back on episode 4 of this series. He wrote The Female of the Species, another excellent episode of the series.
Good stuff. A great episode. So I'm absolutely for Craig and Ellie coming back on board.
Mm-hmm. And the episode was directed by Dan Attias. Dan has been directing since the mid-80s, right back to Miami Vice.
Wow, permarific.
Yeah, he's been around for a long, long time. His episode of The Wire in season 5 won a Directors Guild of America award for Best Drama Directing. And he's been nominated 3 more times for his work on 6 Feet Under, Sopranos, and Homeland as well. So really, really notable presence in the directing chair.
Oh my goodness, that is like literally some of my favorite non-superhero or sci-fi stuff with regards to The Wire, 6 Feet Under, and Homeland.
Do you not like The Sopranos?
I do like The Sopranos, but I think it insists on itself a little too much.
All right, there, Family Guy. Well, I will say he has been directing since back in the 80s, so I may have chosen some of his directing jobs based on your preferences and your shows that you may have watched, because he's done hundreds of shows.
And I loved Miami Vice as well, growing up. Yeah, I wanted big moustache and massive curly locks and a kind of a permy afro. However,
Magnum P.I.
Maybe one of them had a moustache, though. Alas, I can't grow a moustache, and if I do, I then look like a South American dictator.
Right, well, let's see if your memory of this episode is better than your memories of 80s TV shows. John, do you want to tell us what they gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. Love is in the air with Hughie Campbell and Starlight's blossoming romance, but not for long. With Translucent dead and the deep exiled to Sandusky, Ohio, the 7 become the 5, and Homelander acts on Mesmer's intel. Bringing together the 5, Homelander issues a call to arms as he blames events on Starlight conspiring with Hughie, and remembers Billy and Becca Butcher from a Vought Christmas party from 8 years ago. With a phone call from A-Train, who has Hughie's father held hostage, the boys realize they have been betrayed, and they should never have trusted a washed-up Supe like Mesmer. As they go to ground, Hughie and Kimiko race to save his dad, crippling A-Train in the process. Mother's Milk brings his wife Monique and their daughter to safety, and Butcher kills Mesmer as Face meets Washing Bowl repeatedly. Meanwhile, Homelander digs further into his past events with his social media manager Becca Butcher. Meeting with Dr. Vogelbaum, it is revealed to him that Becca and his child died during childbirth. With events out of his control, Butcher calls in the CIA for protection. Armed with evidence from Butcher, Deputy Director Rayner confronts Madeline Stillwell and Vought International, just as she learns of another big problem, the super terrorist Nakib. In Central Park, Hughie tries to explain everything to her, just as Starlight discovers that love truly does hurt. Bang bang.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I have to say I've been in love, and it does feel like a 9mm round being shoved through your chest sometimes. Boys, what an episode. So much to discuss. So let's jump into it. So as always, each of us have chosen our most interesting boys moment, the protagonists, the 7 moments, which is pretty much our antagonist moments, and any other outstanding moments that we really feel need to be discussed from this episode. So I think I'm going to kick off our boys moments, because this one for me was potentially one of the most unexpected outcomes of this whole thing, which was Hughie versus Butcher. And I'm not talking about the fight of the century, just the moment of the two of them when we had everyone in the warehouse. We had Hughie and Butcher basically about to go at it, because Butcher is constantly riling up Hughie, and we have Hughie actually push back. Yeah. It was just amazing. Like, we've never seen this scene in the comics at all. Essentially, Butcher would always do his discussions with Hughie, and the two of them would have these back-to-back sessions, but without involving the rest of the team. Butcher's MO is really kind of, and even we see it here in this series, it's always, he's gonna do stuff, but he's not gonna let everyone know. He's gonna hold all those cards close to his chest.
Yeah.
And seeing Hughie like yelling at him and actually bringing up his devotion to a dead woman versus a live woman.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just really, hearing that, seeing Hughie grow. And again, he's only been doing this, a couple of weeks, like 2 months at this point. And he's gone from sniveling to a degree by sniveling, I mean, like, he was probably the most shocked. Like, he's talked about how he's been covered in blood more than any man should within a couple of weeks. And then see him take on Butcher, who is, because of Urban, an imposing figure.
Absolutely. No, it's a really, really good scene. I know it kind of follows on from that scene earlier on in the last episode or the episode before, where Butcher was calling out the fact that Hughie was that sniveling character and he's changed and he's turned. You know, part of this moment here is Hughie saying he's going to leave the team. He's walking away now, just at their moment before they're about to take down the Seven, basically, by all the information that they found and everything that they gathered. Hughie's saying, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to go off and leave and run away with Starlight, kind of thing, even after all the warnings that Butcher's given him. You're right, that moment, that line from Hughie where he says, better to be loyal to a dead woman who wouldn't know and wouldn't care. Isn't that right, Billy? You know, that moment is really, like, he's pushing every single button on this guy that could kill him in a half a second, like, you know?
Yeah, that was a great moment, actually, where, as you say, Chris, he stands up to Billy Butcher. And I think, yeah, that line is a real moment where who knows what Butcher could have done there. I think the other great thing here, kind of connects with this Hughie versus Butcher, is that we see Mother's Milk challenge Billy Butcher as well. And I think, you know, there's that moment when the CIA is called in. And I feel that with this moment between Hughie and Butcher, and also Mother's Milk and Butcher, that it's almost like sinking in. You know, it's almost like a bit of therapy, like that superhero association for collateral damage. It's almost like he's had that moment where these two, in particular Hughie, has broken through. You know, Mother's Milk effectively calls him out over going to the CIA. He knows exactly that Rayner gave him everything he wanted except Homelander.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, he challenges Butcher in the same way that Hughie challenges Butcher about effectively allowing his dead wife to throw everyone else under the bus, potentially. So I think this is, you know, is reflected nicely with Mother's Milk as well. I think these two moments, it is kind of slightly defining in this series because, it's that moment where you actually believe that Billy Butcher has taken on board what they've said. You don't really get that sense in the previous episodes that he's listens to what other people says. He has a plan, he has a route, and he goes for it. And so far, up to now, there's been a bit of collateral damage going on. And now when it comes to, I suppose, the boys, he's finally kind of listened to what they've said. So I really like this moment for sure.
I'm really curious if and I want to know what you think. Would the Mother Milk moment have turned out, because we do see later on that Butcher takes on board what Mother Milk has talked about, and the FBI do come and they do start working together with the boys. Would that have still happened if Hughie hadn't have challenged him and brought up the loyalty to his dead wife? Do you think, for me, that's the straw that breaks the camel's back? So basically, or at least weakened it, and then the one that actually cracks it completely is Mother Milk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. I think there is a bit of a cause and effect going on there between them, and I think probably the bigger cause and effect is that these are people with their loved ones around them, and maybe that's the thing that triggers Billy Butcher in this situation, is that Hughie's father is there, and you know, he's looking to protect his dad. Mother's Milk, even though Monique is massively cheesed off with what's going on, you know, her palpable sense of dislike for Billy Butcher is certainly there. But despite that, he's trying to look after his wife Monique and his daughter. And again, it's family. You know, Frenchie is kind of, I don't know what's happened to Cherie. I think she's still in the wind, but I reckon she can look after herself. But, you know, he's got this thing where he's baking cakes with the female, which is really nice. So all these people that they care for are in that room listening to them challenge Billy Butcher. And in some ways, I think Billy Butcher is there going, that's what I wanted to do for my wife. I wanted to protect her from Homelander, but I never got the opportunity because he didn't know what was going on. Here, this is happening to them all. They can do something about it to protect them.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, after Mother's Milk intervention, certainly, he goes to the CIA. So I think, I just really like this kind of, this change in Billy Butcher, but it's not like a complete about turn. You can sense he's doing it grudgingly, but it doesn't feel like it compromises him. Okay. I like it. It feels consistent with the situation.
Yeah, I definitely think that it is the rest of the team that have turned Butch around. I don't think going into that day, waking up that morning, I don't think he was going, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have turned down that offer from the CIA. I think he was going into the day thinking, as always, he's made the right decision to do the right thing and take down Homelander. And I think it is only when Mother's Milk says to him, effectively, you have no family left. And if the collateral damage to what you've chosen to do is my family, you're dead. I'm going to kill you. And I think that's what changed his mind about going back to the CIA, to answer your question, Chris.
Yeah, it's just really interesting because essentially at the end of this episode, the boys are essentially funded by Stillwell. Essentially, they've taken the CIA's deal. So all of those things, the safe house, the funding, the deniability, everything that Stillwell offered and agreed to with Butcher is now in effect. So it leaves us in a very interesting place at the end of this episode going into the finale. That the boys are essentially a Black Ops team. And what do they do with that?
Absolutely.
But yeah, speaking of the ramifications.
Yes.
Let's jump in. John, what was your moment for the boys?
Mine is the Christmas party. It's Christmas party time 8 years ago, and there are seasonal ramifications, basically. Like when any family gets together at Christmas, in this case, the Vought family, it doesn't always end up with peace and goodwill to all men. And I thought this was really nice because you have this flashback. You've got the Deep, seemingly in a better moment in his life where he's still quite the center of attention. Even Stillwell is giving him some attention at this huge corporate Christmas event. But it's that great flashback where we see Billy and Becca Butcher together at this party. And, we have them connect in with Homelander and this great kind of idea that she's been picked out by him because she's managed his Twitter feed. And there's a real nice moment as well with Billy saying, well, isn't that a bit devious? Isn't that lying? It's not you writing the Twitter feed. Just kind of making that point. Well, whose view is this? If you get other people to write it, well then, is that the real Homelander? Yeah. And, it's passed off. It's just a real nice moment. And, he wants her to become, his personal digital media kind of manager for all his different sort of digital, platforms. So we have all this, but it just leads into, the fact that Homelander has been close to his nemesis, and you're waiting for him to realize that in this episode, in the present time, and we get that. It's a really nice moment. Plus, this Christmas party is the genesis of it all. Yeah. And we see, other aspects here coming out. We get to see, Mallory here, in another flashback, through Mesmer, and just her showing Butcher the file, or from the CCTV in Vought. So, it just explodes that story out further as to why Billy Butcher, is doing what he's doing. It gives him his cause. And I thought that was really good. I really liked it.
Absolutely. And in fairness to the producers of the show, I think it's even worse what's presented on screen than what was in my head when Billy was describing what happened to his wife when he was talking to Hughie in the park. I think what they've actually presented here just feels worse. I think just the idea of her being captive effectively in the office for 3 hours by Homelander and having the CCTV footage of that presented to Billy, it just feels so much worse than I was expecting. From the description of it, I don't know whether that makes sense, but I don't know. The whole situation just seems like a worse level. And obviously we'll talk about more of what that led to in another point later on. But I think just the whole moment of Billy realizing, because he still seems quite innocent when Mallory's approached to him just after losing his wife, he still seems quite innocent, and it just feels like it absolutely breaks him to discover this about his wife.
Definitely. Yeah. As I say, it's the crucible for all of this, really, isn't it? So I think I had to give mention to the Christmas party.
Yeah.
It can be the downfall of anybody in a corporate setting.
Yeah, in more ways than one.
Exactly.
It's so interesting to see. So this is a slight divergence, the Christmas party, in terms of Becca working for Vought and stuff. And what we see and how it kind of all plays out. It's a divergence from the comics.
Okay.
But I'm really happy this works. The ramifications, I can talk to more, in kind of Chris's Corner next episode. Because I want to dive into a bit more there.
Yeah.
But I won't do it on this. But it's definitely, while it's a divergence, it feels 100% right. And I agree with you. They could have gone down the route of showing what happened in that room. But they don't even show that.
Oh, no.
And that's to be able to get that level of emotion across, the writers and producers and the director for this episode. It's amazing to see, because just with that one scene where Mallory shows Butcher, you see the man break further. So again, I've liked Karl Urban for years.
Yeah. But
this just it's sensational to see him do this, because it does show you again his acting chops.
Absolutely.
He really, it comes across. And even his disdain, against Homelander, or is that disdain? I say disdain in the loosest sense. In the sense when he meets Homelander and they talk about the Twitter feed, that alone, that for me was giggles away. I've worked in digital marketing. I've worked in social media marketing for years. I've done some of those gigs and I've always found that quite funny. And he's just like, yeah, but it's authentic. I'm like, well, it's not. You're lying. But anyway.
That's your voice is being created by a marketing team and being put out there. Yeah. I really, really like that scene. I love that as well, Chris. You know, obviously we worked in marketing together at a time as well. So, we both dealt with these types of things. And it does absolutely surprise me sometimes when there are people that think that somebody who's very famous is sitting at their computer all day sending out tweets. You know, they don't really do that very often. Not the bigger celebrities, and these guys would be massive. The capes that are on here, the Supes that are on here are massive celebrities, but there's no way you'd expect them to be sitting down at a table on their Twitter feed sending out messages to their fans. Well, unless they're the Deep, who have absolutely nothing else to do. So, or A-Train, who can, you know, send about 6,000 tweets every 5 seconds, you know?
Well, he'll probably destroy his phone.
Lag. He probably would.
Yeah, it's all about that lag, man. But
Absolutely.
Speaking of one Supe, Derek, do you want to take us onto your boys' moment?
Yeah, my boys' moment is Hughie versus A-Train. I think this is quite a massive moment in the episode. I love how it's handled, because we finally do get to see a bit of A-Train's real personality, or how he's selling it effectively to Hughie, where he's basically, I think the best challenge from it is saying to Hughie, everything you did on purpose. Everything I've done has been accidents. I didn't go out of my way to kill your girlfriend, Robin. Yes, you've killed, Translucent. You've led to the death of Popclaw. Everything that you've done has been on purpose, basically. So I love the challenge between the two of them. I also very intrigued by the fact that Hughie was able to tempt him to let his father go by giving him some of the, some V, basically saying that he had some V available. Still showing that A-Train is completely addicted. We see some moments earlier on in the episode where they're saying that he's effectively, his superpower is dropping off.
Yeah.
He's beginning to lose his power, and he's saying that, a third stringer from another team would be able to just take his place on the 7 now because he's so bad now and getting much worse. And if he doesn't go back on the V, it could be gone. His powers could be gone, which is the first time we've really heard about anybody being like that. I wonder if it's because he got addicted to the V and that is in turn taking away some of his powers as well. Potentially that's it, because we haven't heard anybody else being on V. We haven't heard anybody else using V, since being originally, infected, for want of a better word, as children. Nobody seems to have to take a regular dose of it or anything like that, but he seems to do it. And because he's done it, it kept him being fast, and now he's dropping off because he's losing it. Is this just a form of withdrawal symptoms from not taking V as a drug?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I loved how Hughie plays A-Train like a fiddle, purely because he's an absolute addict. And it's like, it's the most immoral thing for Hughie to do, but in that moment to save his dad,
absolutely,
to, get the advantage in order to kind of, nullify A-Train, he's absolutely playing the best rule book. It's like, feed the addiction, feed the need that he's got.
Yeah.
And, in any other context, an addict, that is absolutely not what you want to do, in some respects. And here it's just, take it. You can have that one more hit. And I think, I just thought it was so manipulative.
Oh, yeah.
But so clever to do it like that. Cause I was there going, how, I think all the way through this series, there's part of you that's going, okay, they've taken out translucent with a plug up the butt, an explosive plug of C4. But you are kind of there going, well, how would they deal with Homelander? How would they deal with the speed of A-Train? How would they deal with Queen Maeve and all of this kind of stuff? And here is one of those answers. And it's actually, nothing more than, playing on and abusing someone's addiction, and their psychology. And I thought, what an absolute spanking thing to do.
And I love that he's using what he learned from the race that A-Train had earlier on in the season, because he's effectively saying to him, what's better here, the rush of taking V or the thought that once you take it, you'll be back to being the fastest man alive? He knows that A-Train's been doing this to try and keep himself on the 7. So I love that. I think that's really interesting that he was using it that way. Also, huge props to the people who set up this scene. While they're having this conversation, A-Train and Hughie, if you notice in the background, the screen coming off, where the vents are, and then you see the female dropping to the floor in the background of the scene. It is so good. It's like Alien, or it's like Predator. It's something
really good,
where she's just dropping down in the background of the scene and then comes in with that sledgehammer to the knee. It cracks his leg open. That's brutal looking scene as his bone comes out through his leg. And that's the last we see of A-Train in the episode. Where have they put him? Where have they stashed him? Is he just on the floor screaming of Hughie Senior's house, or where is he? We don't have no idea. Have they got him in reserve for later potentially? But yeah, really liked the scene. I thought it was really good having the standoff properly for the first time, I think, since we had that handshake back in episode 1. They've seen each other once at Popclaw's place, but A-Train didn't recognize Hughie, and then this episode is where they're having their final showdown, the thing that started it all for Hughie on his path, meeting up with A-Train in this episode. So,
I mean, dare I say it, the female and the crowbar is more deadly than the A-Train.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
For me, circling back to what you're talking about regarding V, it's kind of like steroids when you're taking it so much, and then, as you said, your body goes into DT withdrawals, and you're less of a man or less of a person before you start taking the steroids. So for the way I see, or I believe they're taking the V is, okay, you're given V as a child and it brings out this superpower. You can then, and you're up to a certain power level. You can then start taking V as a steroid-like substance, which is highly addictive. But the more you take it, the more addicted you become. And what comes from that then is this, basically when you stop taking it, you start going back to below the level you were before taking it.
Right.
that's the way I see them kind of playing. It's because you're right. We haven't heard of anyone else taking it and anyone else being an addict.
Mm-hmm.
So it just seems to be like A-Train he wasn't the biggest of the big. He wasn't super at that point.
Yeah.
But he started taking the V to get in, and that got him into the 7. And he's been taking it since.
Right. Interesting.
That's just kind of the way I took it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to see how it goes. I completely agree with you on that scene with the vent while Hughie is distracting A-Train, because I saw the vent pop and I was like, what
was that?
What? And it kind of, and then your attention is automatically drawn back to A-Train screaming. And so that's it. But then in the background, you see the female, and I was just like, oh, this is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm right with you on where the hell is A-Train? And what have they done with him? Or is he with the CIA? Because the timelines are a bit questionable.
Yeah.
Or do we, in the beginning of episode 8, see A-Train like in the hospital calling Homelander? It's definitely going to be an interesting final episode.
Or was he handed over to the CIA, as you say, potentially as part of the information for them? We'll see next episode. I think we got to the end of the episode and John turned around to me and was like, is A-Train dead? Did they kill A-Train off screen? But I don't think so. Is it now the 4 instead of the 7?
He's become the B train.
But speaking of the 7.
I'm going down to F train.
Well, yeah.
But speaking of the 7, let's get on to our antagonist moments, 7 moments. Chris, do you want to give us your 7 moment?
Yeah, I'm going to talk about essentially the Deep. The Deep is in a deep. He is in the middle ass of nowhere, and essentially far, far from the ocean. The closest he has is a lake.
I love when the mayor of the town points out that we have a lake and just kind of goes, like, if you want to get down to the lake, and he just kind of points at his outfit going, well, obviously that's where we're going to be, you know?
I liked how they're portraying the Deep in this part, because this is just it's so interesting. You see that scene where he's just walking around after the mayor leaves. He's just walking. He's got his per diem card because he can go down to get some froyo. And they do really good ice cream. And then he's just walking around the apartment, and then he starts his memoirs.
Oh, yes.
Which I just giggled my ass off. It was just so funny to see. Cause it's just a blank page. And then the hookup happens.
I was just going to say, yet the title is Deeper, a memoir.
Yeah.
And you get that impression that he's been sitting in front of that screen about 6 or 7 times, and all he's come up with is the title, and it's just an E-or at the end of his name. That's it. Brilliant.
I really like where they took it with the hookup.
Yeah.
First of all, for 2 reasons. The first is the horrific gills.
Oh, yes.
So this is, again, departure from the comic books. It's not in the comic books. It's not to our knowledge, because we've never seen the Deep never takes off his costume in the comic books.
Yeah.
So we're not made, or we've never discusses having gills. And I just think this is, it's just funny. It's just like, yeah, of course, a guy has to breathe underwater. He has to have gills.
Absolutely.
So the fact that it's been a rumor for years, and no one's confirmed it, and the girl wants to see it.
Yeah.
And then we get taken into that scene with his hookup. And first of all, what? The lady has a bit of a fetish, apparently. Which is interesting. But it's the dichotomy of what happened with Starlight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Versus what's happening with him now.
Yeah. He has no power here in the situation, again, and he's absolutely feeling the same experience that he forced himself, when he forced himself on Starlight. He's feeling the same experience that she felt, without a doubt. It's a tough old scene for watching the Deep, because you can tell he just can't get out of it. He has no way out of it. The way she is sticking her hands inside his gills is painful for him, but she's getting off on him and not letting him move at all. It's really, it's a really well acted scene from Chase Crawford, I have to say. He's really good in this series.
It's really good. I mean, there was that moment where I'm kind of like going, is this just a fetish thing, like you say, Chris? And I think it is partly that. And then it's also, or is this someone sent, effectively to kill him? I actually thought that potentially he was going to get killed.
Oh, okay.
It was this payback for the accusation leveled at him by Starlight. I thought there was kind of a vendetta type thing that had happened here, and this was the assassin disguised effectively, and this was going to be the Achilles heel ultimately.
Right.
Was his gills, and it did. It made for uncomfortable watching to see. The powerlessness. It's in the same way that he made Starlight, powerless, and it's just kind of, it was pretty full on, I have to say, and I thought it was really, really well done, but it was full on. So I was kind of quite pleased when we see him in the 7-Eleven in the local supermarket doing his shopping. After that, I was like, okay, he did survive. Because he is a douchebag. He has kind of been exiled by Vought into Sandusky in Ohio. And, he's only on $75 per DM. There's not really much crime, so he's not going to be able to do much. He can't write his memoir. And I have to say, just briefly coming away from the Gill thing for a moment, I absolutely laughed my head off at all the dead fish in the fishmonger's cabinet that he was walking past just before he gets to the lobster, and what happens with that where he tries to save the lobster. But it's kind of like, here is the Deep. He speaks with fish. He wants to save all the fish, and what's lined up on the fishmonger's counter, but about 100 dead fish, but all packed on ice. And then he has his moment where, the great escape goes badly wrong for that lobster.
Now, can I ask a question? Because we did watch the episode as usual, with our subtitles on, and there's a moment where he's talking to the lobster, where it seems to turn slightly sexual again. And I wasn't sure, is that definitely the way they intended it? It's just when the fishmonger comes over to take the lobster out of the tank, you see on his face the horror when he picks up another one of the lobsters in the tank. He goes, no, I want that guy. That one's my guy. That's my guy. And it suddenly feels, it doesn't feel like he wanted to save him. It feels like there's suddenly a bit of a dirty conversation going on once again between the two of them. Is he seeking solace after he effectively has been forced by the hookup? Is that what it is? He's seeking someone that knows the feeling of a good pair of gills, potentially. Is that what it is?
It could be, because at the end of the day, it's a lobster and it's not a freshwater one.
Yeah.
So I presume all manner of stuff could have happened back at their little cramped apartment.
I just don't want to think about it, and we don't have to, because unfortunately, poor lobster does get served.
Could have done a really good nipple twister.
Maybe. I said I didn't want to think about it, John.
Now you have.
But he is slightly reminding me of the vet from League of Gentlemen, who seems like he just wants to save every pet in the land, but on an unfortunate mistake of circumstance, he always kills every pet he's trying to take care of, which really is feeling like the Deep now. Can it get any worse than this guy being shipped out of New York, his beautiful digs that he has in Vought Towers, out to this tiny little hovel where there's no crime going on. He's got his hookups who are forcing him to have sex with them in really disgusting ways. And now he tries to save a lobster who gets effectively a knife through the head. Does it get any worse for the Deep now?
There's a certain large aquatic body count piling up behind the Deep for sure. Yeah. Yes, Dr. Chunnery from League of Gentlemen. Yes. Yeah. So I expect many more fishy deaths.
I think there might be a few. We only have one more episode left, so maybe throughout next season as well, it'll just follow him around. And just one of the other things that you'll notice, Chris, I know you've constantly mentioned about X-Ray. Go check it out. They've added in videos, and they've added in making of stuff in the videos. One thing that probably isn't standing out as much as would be if the deleted scenes were in the episodes. The Deep does constantly have moments where he's chatting up women all the time. You see it at the Christmas party in this episode, but there's another deleted scene from this episode where you see him chatting up some lifeguards from the town. The video that he was doing for the Seven had him chatting up other women, but it seems like they're editing out all of the good things or the potentially good things that are happening for the Deep, the places where he's anyway happy or smiling, and just ending off with these versions of his life just getting worse and worse and worse as the episodes go on. And rightly so. As I said, the first episode kind of set him up as a character I didn't like. So his life getting worse and worse and worse is kind of justifiable back from these 7 episodes, really. Yeah,
exactly. And again, I can't sing the praises enough of X-Ray. Mm-hmm. I want it in everything now.
Absolutely.
And I'm really spoiled that we'll go to something on Netflix at some point or on Hulu, and it would be like, oh, well, what am I going to do now?
Let's just get everything on Amazon.
So I think that brings my Deep's hookup point to an end. Mm-hmm. So, John, do you want to tell us your antagonist moment?
Yes, mine is Lab Daddy himself, Dr. Vogelbaum, played by John Doman. I really like John Doman as an actor. I think he plays characters really nicely, and I like that here we have someone that is not afraid to stand up and say what's what to Homelander. And I think this moment where Homelander is with him, where he's trying to just find out more about Becca Butcher. So, he's been to Madeline Stillwell earlier to find out what happened to that woman. He's not clear. He just knows it's kind of been swept under the carpet. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have all the information. But Dr. Vogelbaum here, really gives us a horrific picture of what happened after he raped Becca Butcher and what pain she went through. Now, whether that's entirely true is another matter entirely. Because, we see that he has gotten her pregnant. He thought that he wasn't able to do that. And I mean, it did sound alien-esque of that the baby ripped itself out of her womb. And the resulting blood loss, she died on the table.
Yeah.
With then, the baby dying, later on, on the birthing table as well. So it was just a pretty horrific, idea of the consequences of hooking up with Homelander, really. But I think the other great thing here is, there is this fraught relationship between these two. He is Homelander's dad. It's just that he's a laboratory doctor.
Yeah.
And you really get the sense that Dr. Vogelbaum is not happy with his creation in that sense. And we have that moment where, Homelander is strutting, saying, I'm the world's greatest superhero. And the retort is, you're my greatest failure.
Yeah.
And he likens everything to, he talks about the breeding of dogs, how the ones that, you could have the best breeding in the world, but the ones that are taken away from their mother, generally end up being angry and violent. Mm-hmm. And this is what happens with Homelander. So it's a real nice moment back, in time with respect to Homelander. And I'm really pleased that they put this context around him. Again, with, the X-ray, there's a really nice moment where you see, that he has, mother issues. You can now understand, in some ways a bit the weird relationship that he has with, Madeline Stillwell, and why he is kind of creepy affectionate around her.
Yeah.
Because there's a great moment in the X-ray where he's being told that Dr. Vogelbaum is his father, but the tutor who's teaching him, effectively brainwashing him with the Stars and Stripes, the American flag, the US of A, Thanksgiving and all that. He's like, well, are you my mother? and effectively squeezes her to death, killing her. And that's not the first time this has happened. So this is a really interesting kind of psychosis for Homelander. And it really kind of helps to explain why he is the way he is. And I just thought this was a really great scene. I loved Homelander. I love John Doman, and having these two together, effectively talking about Homelander's troubled past and, you know, to what extent that trouble has been forced upon him. You know, it's that nature versus nurture thing. Is it the nurture of being brought up in a laboratory, or is it the fact that he's been genetically bred and the nature of the DNA and the genetics has effectively, coupled with Compound V, has effectively made him a psychopath, which Dr. Vogelbaum has maybe ironed out in other different batches of this test compound. And so, you know, that's another reason why he's his greatest failure, because it's kind of initial work. It's like if Dr. Frankenstein had been able to carry on, the Frankenstein would have been gotten better and better and better in terms of the stitching or the seamlessness of it all, or what, that they could speak, that they would be able to share emotion, that it would be the improvement, It's like, from gingerbread to ice cream cone or whatever it is on Android. It's that iteration of the laboratory testing and experimentation.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It took me a second, and I think that scene that you're talking about, the deleted scene from a previous episode, I think that's actually quite essential to understanding what it is
definitely
that Vogelbaum is saying here about him being his greatest failure. Because effectively what he's saying is, from you onwards, you were the only one that we left in a lab and eventually let out into the world, because what you taught us was doing that creates a psycho. And you're so much of a psycho that we couldn't keep you behind bars because you'd keep killing people, basically. So we have to let you out and we have to keep you on a tight leash. But everybody else was put back into their, well, they wouldn't be put back in with their own families, would they? They'd be put back in with other families. That's why so many of them don't have parents anymore, effectively, because that kind of creates their backstory, which is really interesting. Remember, we go through this with all of the shows that we're talking about, all the Marvel shows that we've done, where you look at all the characters and you go, wow, everybody's lost a father or lost a mother, or has problems with their father or has problems with their mother. This kind of does give you a little bit of context to maybe in this world, the reason why they have problems with them, or the reason there's so many of them dead, is because, well, they're not the real parents. These people were all born in test tubes. That's a nice little touch.
Yeah. On the X-ray scene, I can't for the life of me understand why they didn't keep it in. I'm assuming it's probably a timing thing. Maybe.
I wonder if it's something in the last episode that it couldn't go into that earlier episode, because these are all Amazon Prime shows, so they can be and are, a couple of minutes either way, longer or shorter.
Yeah.
Although I was watching John when he was watching the X-ray scene, and he found it really tough to watch, waiting for the kid to do something really horrible. That's quite horrific, like.
Absolutely. I think for me, this episode can be summed up in menace, because the boys have been found out and they're kind of going to ground. It's the menace of what the Supes that know about them now are going to do. So every time there was that interaction, I just imagined laser beams, crunching of bones, fast fists, all this kind of stuff. I was thinking, when is Black Noir going to sort of crop up and, do some horrendous origami kind of thing with one of the boys or something. It just felt this underlying menace and tension from this episode, because the Supes, the Seven, know.
Yeah.
Yeah. The reason I say I don't understand why it wasn't in is because I agree with you. This really adds to this scene with Vogelbaum, because you get you understand even further. So hopefully maybe there is greater explanation, and we learn more in the final episode. But I think it really sets up the menace, as you say, John, of Homelander. And I'm a sucker for creepy children, like Village of the Damned, Children of the Corn, I'll just, or the Shining with the two twins at the end of the ghosts, at the end of the corridor. Creepy children just, it's terrible. But for me, this whole scene with Becca, John, you hit the nail on the head when you said, if that's what happened. All we right now have is the story coming from one man. And we know Vought lies and changes and twists. So I'm interested to see if that is what happened.
Well, especially because he does say to Homelander, ask me any question and I'll tell you the honest answer. And you see Homelander scoffing at that. So that's an indication that us as an audience should also be scoffing at what this guy's saying, that we should be taking a little pinch of salt. And I think the absolutely horrific way that he describes it to Homelander as well, about, you know, this baby clawing its way out of the body of Becca and her dying in a pool of blood on the table, the way he describes it to him feels like it's almost over-exaggerated.
Big time.
So that Homelander won't go off and investigate it anymore, and maybe it will stop him from doing it to any other women as well. Potentially. That's possibly what it is. I wonder if the reason why Becca was weighing up everything sitting on that bench for those 3 hours is because she was told she had to leave Billy behind to give birth to this child and take care of it forever behind closed doors in Vought Industries. So is she alive somewhere taking care of a super that was born inside her? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah. It's just interesting to see. The one thing I will say is if that was her death, it mirrors the comic books.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
To a degree, in that she died in a bed with a baby clawing its way out of her.
Right. There you go.
So I really want to see the next episode, because that in every time in this series, in the TV show, when I think they're following something, and they completely twist my expectations of what's going to happen. And I'm loving that.
Excellent. Well, let's make it much quicker for you then, Chris. I'll jump in here with my points.
Yes.
Just because you were talking about that menace that's coming from Homelander throughout this episode, my point is actually Maeve standing up for Starlight in this episode, and it comes on the back of Homelander and how menacing he is with the 5 now.
Yes.
After dropping down from 7 to 5, they've lost Translucent, the Deep has left the city, they're now down to 5, and one of them's brand new. Starlight's only just been with them for a month, and it seems like Homelander can't trust her because of him making all those connections with what's happened. I love how he's investigated everything and put all of the pieces together to realize, even though Starlight doesn't know it, she's been played for a fool by these guys, by Hughie and all the team around him. I think that's really, really good. I was trying to work out as he was talking, how far has he identified the plan of the boys here? Like he has Hughie up on screen and then he stops and kind of goes, but it's not just him. What if he had a whole team behind him? So he has realized exactly what's going on. He knows exactly who Billy Butcher is because he remembers him from the past. He knows what he did to Becca, so he knows why Billy Butcher could possibly be leading this team against them all. And he knows that Starlight is brand new to this game, so she's not been very good at keeping herself to herself and for the team. So, I love the phrase he uses as well to them, where he goes, you've been helping these mud people rise up above us, just the disdain he has for normal human beings. You wonder, does he know anything about his origin? About his exact origin? We know that he lived in a lab, but does he think he was born to a family and brought up in the lab, or does he know he was created with V? You wonder about that because he has so much to say. It's like as if he feels like he's a different species from other humans.
Definitely. I mean, again, the whole talk from Homelander, I just loved. I mean, it summed up for me. I love it when he just, as he walks past Starlight A-Train and looks at Queen Maeve, it's like unpredictable to Starlight, unreliable to A-Train, and downright sloppy to Queen Maeve. Presumably referring to Flight 37 and then everything since. I think the only person that he still holds some respect for is Black Noir in there. Everyone else, he's had enough. They've done too much that isn't exacting and precise, and that's it. He is fantastic. It's like at the moment we're watching Australian Survivor, and one of the contestants on that show, he reads the game absolutely so well, but as someone, I don't particularly like him in the show, and it's the same here. You don't particularly like Homelander, but my goodness, he reads the situation
Absolutely.
spot on, and he's really good. You know, he does his work beforehand. He knows, what's happening here. And I like that he accuses Starlight, because of course that's the obvious thing here. Everything started going to the wall the day she arrived, and you know, he absolutely thinks that she is some kind of co-conspirator with Hughie and this group of men, that have been killing supers, and causing pretty, much all the difficulty, all the issues that the Seven have had for about the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, but again, I like that he is basically just calling her an idiot. He's not saying that she's working with them. He's not saying that she's part of their team. He's saying you've fallen for their plan. And because you've been that stupid, you've put us all in danger. But to the point again, though, that Maeve stands up for Starlight. She hasn't done that in the past. She's been left all on her own and all to her own devices for years. And now Starlight's here and she was going to do the same thing for Starlight. We saw a little moment last episode where she gave a little nod to Starlight to say, you know, it'll all be okay in the future. And now she specifically stands up for Starlight in front of Homelander here, to the point that Homelander says, I haven't seen you care about anybody in years, so there must be something special about this girl. Okay, she's in your charge. If she does something wrong from now on, it's on you. So now they're going to be tied together effectively. If anything goes wrong with Starlight from now on, it's also Maeve's fault in Homelander's eyes. So does that take the protection that Maeve has worked so hard to get from Homelander? Does that take that protection away now? Which is what's intriguing me for the next episode as well. I said earlier on in the season that if anybody's going to take Homelander down, it needs to be someone quite powerful. And I think Maeve had the opportunity to do that. Does this now put another wall between her and Homelander now as well? So it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
100%. That scene where she does end up standing up for her, that whole, the expose of the boys and who they are and how it breaks down each of them and the realization from A-Train. The one thing I'll jump into is Black Noir.
Mm-hmm.
He's the character that's just in the background. He's Mr. Vought.
He's Snake Eyes for G.I. Joe, right?
Exactly. He's just always there. He's the wild card.
Yeah.
That he's the one that I'm like, okay, next episode, he's gonna do something.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we've seen so much of him, or so little of him, or both, from him this episode, or this season, I should say. It's gonna be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next one.
Just one episode left. We'll see what happens on that one.
I think the other good thing with Queen Maeve, a little later in the episode as well, she's having a talk with Starlight, and I think it's, you know, whatever about the shock of seeing Hughie's face up there from Homelander, you know, so she wants to speak to Hughie. You know, Maeve also says, you know, what's our weakness? It's people. It's the same as with anyone. Cut them loose. That way you're bulletproof.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that speaks to why, you know, you have as well through this episode, Hughie's phone going off. She wants to find out what is going on here and potentially then to cut him loose.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But let's get on to our other outstanding moments. Chris, what's your one?
So this one's a bit of a two-parter. The first is Raynor confronting Stillwell. And actually how that's played out, which is we have Raynor sitting there like going, you're out, you're done, you are not going anywhere near the defense industry. Like, we have you dead to rights.
Yeah.
And if you don't follow these conditions, you don't back out, you will do 25 in an orange jumpsuit.
Yeah.
Almost up to a point feels like, oh, we're getting there. They've done it. And then we get Raynor being pulled into, the situation room type thing.
Yeah.
Where we see the confirmation of our first V-powered, kind of terrorist. We thought that potentially the female was going to be one of the only ones, or that she was like the first of many, if you will. But no, this kind of shows that she was just one fraction in their superhero terrorist or supervillain terrorist, army. because she was the People Liberation Front, I think, something like that, or the Human Liberation Front, or, I think I'm just thinking of all the different Life of Brian, Monty Python, names here, but she was one terrorist group.
Yeah.
And what we see here is Naquib is a different terrorist group, and he is now powered. He is now their hero, but a terrorist. So it really, we go from, oh my God, this is it, Rayner versus Stillwell. It's coming down to this. It's done to, what does this do? Because Rayner's gonna have to, like, Stillwell's plan, or Vaught's plan of introducing who can take down supervillains, superheroes, so they need to be in the defense force, has worked, because officially now we have our first confirmation of a supervillain.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stillwell knew that was going to happen, because when Rayner was reading the Riot Act to her, telling her everything that's going on and telling her that she's going to be trading in that high class suit for an orange jumpsuit. Great line. When she says that to her, you can tell by Stillwell's face that she knows something's planned and something's happening very soon. You know, I'm really intrigued with what they've actually done here. Did they really know that this was all going down today? Does that mean somebody's in the CIA feeding information to Vought International? Probably, because we know there are connections there. She's had phone calls from inside the CIA before, so potentially this is all set up to cover Stillwell's tracks and get the Seven back into the armed forces. So yeah, really interesting scene.
Yeah, and I think she passes comment when she leaves to go, I hope everything's okay or all right, you know? So yeah, I definitely think she knows it's going down.
Yeah, I'd be really intrigued, because as you say, Chris, you know, this whole episode has had the setup that the CIA are now working with the boys, so the boys are now fully funded. So potentially now they're working alongside the Seven if this all goes down the way Stillwell wants it to happen. So that'll be interesting to see. How do you keep them on a leash when everybody's working together on the same side?
Additionally, the question now becomes, who else is out there? So how many more? Because this is just, so we know of two. We know of one confirmed who's out there being a terrorist, and now, or a liberator from his side, and we know female was the other. How many more are sleepers, or how many more have been created?
Exactly.
That's it. I kind of imagine there's a whole sleeper cell across the US, because the female was in the US, that they've been brought in through Vaught's supply channels, and that there's just all these different cells, terrorist cells throughout the US.
Yeah.
So, well, it'll be interesting to see. I'm hoping the first opening moments of episode 8 will kind of address this new situation, this new status quo. So that's kind of really my main outstanding moments. John, what is your outstanding moments for this episode?
Mine is, it's the meeting of, Starlight and Hughie in Central Park, but I think it's a particular part of that. And it's the fact that, you know, we've had this idea that you've got ego, you've got psychosis, you've got, just pure, sociopath and psychopaths all in Vought International, all as part of the Seven. All these superheroes really are troubled people, on a scale. What I really like is that in this instance, as Hughie explains to Starlight why he's there, what he's done, Starlight's first thing is essentially to do a citizen's arrest, to say, I'm taking you to the police. That of all the superheroes, you can see why Hughie connected there, but it was done undercover as well. Whilst yes, he did fall for her, because we have them, going to the hotel at the start of the episode, and you have those questions coming from Starlight, why did you bring me to the hotel? Why not to your father's?
Yeah.
I want to know that, I know who you are effectively, because you've been a bit of a mystery to me. I like the fact that despite all the explanation, her first thought is not to be a superhero and take over from the law enforcement. It is to just simply arrest you and take you to the authorities to be processed as you would. So I just like the fact that, that links into that same kind of philosophy as Daredevil and Batman, which is, yes, they're vigilantes, but they will drop their prey off at the local police department.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, because I think if she brought Hughie back to the towers, I think she even says Homelander would kill him. The police would just arrest you and they'd put you through due process. But if I bring you anywhere near there, Homelander's just going to cut you in half, basically.
Exactly.
So I think there's only one option, really, just arresting him and bringing him up to a police station and telling them what he's done. I do love the conversation, as you say, John. I really like the fact that Starlight's asking the questions of Hughie that exactly as presented to her by Homelander. And Hughie tries to say and tries to give explanations, tries to give reasons why he did it. But all she wants to know is, did you kill Translucent? And Hughie's answer to that is, yes, I did. And are you using me to get close to the 7? And the answer was yes. So, there's nothing at all that Hughie can say to her because she believes everything that Homelander's told her now. So there's nothing he can say to deny it.
Yeah. But the interesting part is we learn that she is completely not aware about Compound V and her background. So is that going to come up?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, where does that leave her? Like, she's going to have to learn her origin story, and will that, at least right now, her belief in Hughie is shattered.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
As she potentially learns the truth about the other things, will that potentially mend some of it?
Maybe.
Because for me, I really want these, I am shipping Annie and Hughie.
Right.
I want these two, it's Clark and Lois, it's Romeo and Juliet, it's, okay, well, that's probably
that's a bad one, Chris.
Kind of analogy because they both die in the end.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, who knows? It is the boys.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see she tries, and because at the end, Hughie gets away, but it's really interesting. What would she do with this new information?
Yeah, with 2 gunshots to the chest of Starlight as well. Lucky Billy was watching over, and I like that as well because Billy calls out to Hughie and says, "Get out of here," and Hughie does listen to Billy. When Starlight takes those 2 shots to the chest, Hughie doesn't run back to see if she's okay or anything like that. He gets the hell out of there because he knows he would be in prison. He knows he would be taken to the cops. He'll try and find a way to prove to her. He'll try and find a way to tell her that what all the things he did were for a right reason. But I don't know whether it'll work out for him in the future.
No, exactly. But on to our final outstanding moment. Derek, what's yours?
I don't like seeing the death of a character go unmentioned on an episode, so my final other outstanding moment from the episode is the loss of Mesmer as a character, because I think this is one of the most brutal deaths, in a way, that we've seen in the season so far, particularly because of the conversation that's going on between Billy Butcher and Mesmer as Billy tracks him down to the train station, tracks him down to the bathroom, effectively, grabs him and starts beating on him. And then we see these little flashes that Mesmer's getting into Billy Butcher's past.
Yeah.
And he says to him, "I can help you find your wife." But Billy's not going to give him the opportunity to do so. It feels like Billy tells him, and it's not on screen, but it's my read of the situation. It feels like Billy tells him, "I'm going to kill you in a second," as Mesmer's trying to read his mind, because that's when the fear comes into Mesmer. That's why he looks so terrified of Billy when he picks him up and plants him through that sink multiple times. He looks absolutely terrified before Billy even goes near him, just after touching him for the last time, effectively. So it looks so brutal. It looks really, really violent mentally plus physically afterwards. So Billy was completely let down by another Supe, even though he had no involvement in it. He's the one that was able to connect all the dots to find out how they were found out by the 7. It was all because the guys used Mesmer in the past. He told them never to use Supes. And once again, a Supe has betrayed Billy Butcher, and he's not going to let that go by without doing something about it. So, pretty brutal, big moment, I think, showing how brutal Billy really is when unleashed on the Supes.
Yeah, because this is without his powers.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine if Butcher is given V? Like, what he's going to be able to do?
Oh, I hope that doesn't happen in the next episode. I don't want that to happen. I want him to be the human versus the V-powered superheroes. That's what I want to happen. He can and has killed a couple of superheroes now, in this show. So, who are V-powered. Some of them not powerful as in punching, but some of them with powers. So I'm hoping they don't just do a Superman 4 and have him injected with Superman powers to fight Superman. I don't think it can be that.
I have this feeling that there's going to be some kind of kryptonite that we've just not heard about, or Dr. Vogelbaum has probably put a small explosive device just behind, his left earlobe or something like that.
Yeah.
So that his head
The
just goes
MacGuffin,
pop.
if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you can imagine that if Homelander really wanted to, very quickly, all of those guys will be dead.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things you kind of learn throughout the series here, isn't it? That everybody kind of tiptoes a little bit around Homelander. They treat him with far more respect than they treat other people because they know if he loses it, everybody loses their lives, basically. We heard that from Rayner before. This guy can take out 1,000 people in a split second. So you need to be careful about how you're dealing with them. So I don't know whether Billy's going to have that same restraint if he goes up against Homelander, or will he just be cut in half by the laser beamed eyes in the future. But I did love this scene between him and Mesmer, because it just shows you at this stage, it's 8 years on, he could have had an opportunity there for Mesmer to at least been able to find the truth about what happened to his wife. Remember, that's what happened on the TV show. That's how Mesmer used his powers on the TV show, was finding bodies and finding people that were kidnapped. So Mesmer could have potentially used his powers to help Billy Butcher put to rest that story of what happened to his wife, but he's not willing to do that. He's just going to kill him for what he did to his team. So I thought that was really, really interesting, very intriguing to see what happens in the future. That's it for our moments, I think, for the episode.
Yeah. Any notes?
I have one quick one. We get jings, which is Scottish slang. We get that from Hughie's dad in this episode. And the reason, this is just a pure Easter egg from the comic books, which is in the comic books, Hughie uses this consistently.
Oh, right.
It's Scottish slang. Now, they swear in the comic books, but it's just Hughie's way of swearing, if you will.
Interesting.
So we don't get Hughie saying it, we do get his dad, which is just a nice little touch.
Interesting. I always thought that was what Velma said in Scooby-Doo.
That's Jinkies.
There you go. Very close.
So I've just searched that up. It's an exclamation in Scottish, used to express surprise.
There you go.
Excellent.
Any other notes?
One note for me for this episode, because it's awesome seeing Bones and Scotty back on screen again together.
Yeah, that's a great moment.
Simon Pegg and Carl Urban back on screen side by side. I don't think they spent very much time together on the Star Trek movies. Even in the one that Simon Pegg wrote, the last one, where he kind of had moments with everybody because he was writing the movie, so he put himself in scenes with almost everybody in the film. That's not actually true. That's a bit of a joke. But I don't think you had very many moments with Carl Urban on screen during Star Trek. But I know the cast actually got on quite well, so it was kind of cool just to have that moment where they just stand and look at each other for a split second and then say hello, nice to meet you, kind of thing. I always like those kind of little crossover moments. Anything from you, John?
No, nothing from myself. Dare I say it? It's on to the podcast within a podcast. Chris's Corner.
It is. Welcome, one and all. We're still working on our theme tune to Chris's Corner, so any of you musically talented people, feel free to send in your submissions and we will include it as our theme song. But right now, because I know so many of you are so happy with my musically challenged theme songs, I'm gonna give you the death metal version of Chris's Corner. There you go. That's going to hurt my voice for a while. But that was Chris's Corner in death metal. Anyway, Chris's Corner today, we're going to talk about Mallory because we're introduced to Grace Mallory in this episode. And that is a slight departure. Mallory is a central character in the comic books. We've heard about the Mallory files. The one thing is that she has been gender swapped. In the comic books, he is Lieutenant Colonel Greg D. Mallory. But now obviously in the series, they've called her Grace Mallory. So that's just the main departure. And that's the only thing, because we've only got a glimpse. Essentially, in the comic books, which I'll quickly focus in on just to give you some of the quick touches of Mallory and who he was, without hopefully giving away too much. So as I said, Colonel Mallory, Lieutenant Colonel Mallory, was the actual original team leader of the boys. He created the boys. And, he was only mentioned, and talked about, in the comic books for all the way up to about 48 issues. We don't actually get introduced and we don't actually meet Mallory face to face until issue 49. So it's quite similar here, which is we keep hearing about Mallory and the Mallory files, and we kept hearing different things about this person, Mallory. And it's not until well into the series, in this case, issue 49, that we meet Mallory. Interestingly enough, when we do meet Mallory, he's in his 90th year, but he looks 60. Essentially, Compound V has slowed his aging crazily.
Interesting. Sounds like a certain director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yes.
Sounds very like Nick Fury,
yes,
doesn't it?
exactly. And because there's always that fun head director of S.H.I.E.L.D. might have been the first super soldier. It's the same here. Mallory was the first test subject for the new and improved Compound V, which was brought over from the Germans in World War II.
Right.
I'm going to jump on a bit we do get the backstory of the boys for V1, because we're actually in boys V3. This is the third incarnation of the boys. The boys, the history we get is that, and this is about issue 54 and 55, we get the backstory of Mallory as he tells Hughie everything. And it's essentially Mallory and his friend, Rick joined the CIA after the war. Because they wanted to do something about Vought American bringing superheroes into World War II. Because we find out that this isn't the first time that Vought trying to sneak or bring the Supes into the war. They actually brought the initial first band of Supes into World War II to disastrous results, which actually caused the whole of Mallory's platoon to basically be killed. He was the sole survivor,
right,
including all the Supes died. So he basically joins the CIA because he wants to do something about them. And he's considered the whack job because no one else knew it there. So he essentially becomes the first Black Ops kind of CIA. So he builds his own company and he makes friends with someone called the Legend, who I've discussed before, and essentially he finds Compound V, he finds Vogelbaum, and the story kind of continues. He then creates the Boys 2, if you will, where he starts to monitor, police, and liquidate, quote unquote, the Supes as they step out of line.
Right.
And he hires Butcher as his muscle. It's quite a similar scene to what we see in the TV show, where he goes to Butcher after the death of his wife,
right,
and brings him in.
Very good.
Tells him the truth, brings him in, and kind of from there we see the team of the boys grow.
Excellent.
Because Butcher brings in, Frenchie, female, they all kind of come together. And then I'm just going to wrap up really quickly by saying, essentially, they continued being the boys, V2, for quite a while, until the September 11th attacks, which is mirrored in the flight, issues that we see in this series. Essentially, everything goes to hell, and the Supes, the Seven, and Mallory's boys V2 clash, and, Mallory has disastrous results. We've heard about we've heard about the issues Mallory has faced. We kind of get touches it from in the show. But essentially, bad things happen. I don't want to give away too much. Bad things happen, and just basically Mallory leaves. He's had enough. And he disbands the boys. And goes to live in seclusion.
Right. Excellent. So there has been some touches coming from the comic books, definitely. We can definitely see some things that are aligned there, and I'd say we'll probably see a bit more of Mallory either next episode or next season.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
No problem. This has been Chris's Corner. Back to your regular scheduled podcast. Boys, that is the end of this episode, and the end of our podcast. So before we wrap up, what did you think of this episode? I'm going to throw it to John. Well, give us your numeral rating of this, if you will?
I'm giving this 5 post-coital pizza rolls out of 5. I just thought this was absolutely spot on. In a sense, nothing was resolved and an awful lot was resolved. We've still got the big showdown in the final episode, and yet so much was explained. And I think, as I said before, for me, it was just that overriding menace that the superheroes know, and what are they going to do? How are they going to get themselves out of it? How are the boys going to self-preserve and get themselves out of the crosshairs of the superheroes? I like the fact that it came back to the CIA and Rayner and them kind of taking control, but Vought almost being one step ahead. I loved Hughie and Starlight. I loved this whole romance blossoming, but effectively no sooner has it started and it's over, just with the presence of Billy Butcher watching the hotel where they've gone into. And then everything after that is a complete and utter train smash, effectively, for this couple, where she's been shot at the end. And yeah, she really does know how true love hurts. And so does the Deep, ultimately, in that, he gets a bit of his own medicine, really, as some form of rough justice, along with his lobster friend with a knife to the head. So I just really enjoyed, this, and I thought it was a great episode. So yeah, 5 post-coital pizza rolls out of 5.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, nothing else to add. Really good episode.
Chris, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, no, I'm the exact same. Derek, you've taken the words, and I should say, John, you took the words first. This was an amazing episode. I can't give it more, and I'm just dying to get into this next episode. So with that, it's about time we jump into some feedback. In our section we like to call Frenchie's Letters.
Yes, just me and John here for Frenchie's Letters, our feedback section for the boys. Sylvie Carbonell has come over to our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/TV podcast industries. She's catching up on the boys. Just once a week, she's kind of watching an episode along with us. So she's a little bit behind, but she's sent us some feedback on episode 4 and episode 5. John, do you want to give us your feedback on episode 4?
Yeah, Sylvie for episode 4 goes, I was happy to have your podcast to listen to after watching this episode. I was shocked and horrified by the plane crash scene. That moment when Homelander just turns his back on the little girl and her mother, Queen Maeve, wanted to save, was heartbreaking and disgusting. I couldn't speak or share anything about this episode since no one around my circle of friends is watching it. So thanks again for your podcast, guys. I really enjoyed listening to your discussion about the episode. Oh, did you guys notice Butcher's white French bulldog at the beginning? Just like in the comics, as Chris mentioned on a previous podcast. Yay for Chris. My best boys moment was when Frenchie bonded with the female. I found it very touching how he somehow understood right away how all she wants to do is go back home. Thank you so much, Sylvie, for the feedback. Yeah, I mean, that airplane scene is just, I think it's a work of genius because it does horrify you totally. And then it disgusts you in equal measure, especially when Homelander switches it around to effectively promote Vought International and himself as the defender of morals, values, or whatever you want to call them. So it's a really powerful bit of TV, I think.
Absolutely. And I think also because you've seen so many times in superhero cartoons and movies, a Superman type character saving a plane from crashing. It's one of those things that you go, well, if we had superheroes in our universe, they'd save the planes. I think they even had it in Iron Man where he did the save of all the people falling out of the plane, didn't they? And Superman's done it before. But you have that moment with this character, Homelander's down there going, What do you expect me to do? Stand in the middle of the sky with no kind of any force to bank against and stop this plane? What if I ram all the way through it and kill everybody on board when people can see that? If I just walk away, everybody dies here and nobody knows what happened. So it's a really, really brutal scene, but fantastically done for TV, definitely.
Yeah, and good spot on Billy Butcher's French bulldog called Terror. Yes, I saw him terrorizing I think it was a Shih Tzu or a poodle of some sort in one of the comics that I'm reading through. Yes, reading through the first issue. He is certainly a terrorist when it comes to the female doggies, for sure.
He does what Butcher wants him to do. It's a real shame they couldn't put him in the show. You know, they say don't work with kids or animals. So I guess they've taken that literally and just put him in these flashback scenes. Really hopeful that we get to see him in next season. At some point, we get to see a little bit of a flashback with Billy and his true companion, this lovely little dog who's quite dark and evil as long as he's doing his master's bidding. So.
Yes. Just like his master.
Exactly.
Sylvie also has some episode 5 feedback. Sylvie says, catching up on episode 5 here. Sadly, still a bit behind you guys, but I'm getting there. Guys, please, can we mention the great work done by Elizabeth Shue as Madeline Stilwell? Mm-hmm. I've been a fan of her since Adventures in Babysitting, so that says how old I am. But wow, I love how she portrays Stilwell. Strong and powerful in appearances, very intelligent. But we can feel her fear when Homelander meets her in the parking lot. She's conflicted and scared. She's definitely part of the villain, but I can't wait to see where her character is going. Mm-hmm. Elizabeth does a tremendous job at keeping the Watchers hating her for a moment and then feeling for her at one point. She looks like she's babysitting a bunch of kids. I can only feel for her at one point. She's definitely level expert at manipulation, but her relationship with Homelander looks more like a mother versus her spoiled child and less like a boss versus her star employee. Absolutely cannot agree with you more. I think Elizabeth Shue plays the corporate bigwig really well, but at the same time, there is that palpable uncertainty. And yeah, I think you're right, probably fear with Homelander. You know, she knows that he's watching her. She seems to be able to give a level of control purely because she provides him with this motherly touch that he seems to be lacking. He seems to have had, that maybe separation issues or just has been devoid in his formative years of loving parents. That's the only way she can leverage herself over him is through being sort of disturbingly motherly in some respects. It is, dare I say, even less mother versus spoiled child, as much as creepy mother with creepy spoiled child. That maybe is a little too sexual for what is right for genetics.
Yeah, absolutely. There is also that weird thing of her being a really powerful character walking on eggshells all the time around him. Like, she's effectively in control of this multi-level organization. She's doing such a big job in this organization. She's taking care of everything that's going on around the Supes. Yet she actually has to walk on eggshells around all of these guys in case, one of them kills her effectively and explodes and kills her kind of thing. Really good connection as well. I absolutely knew her from Adventures in Babysitting. I think we're around the same age, Sylvie. Definitely remember that. Yeah. But nice connection there that she's also babysitting all of these spoiled kids of Supes as well. So maybe they cast her going, actually, she did a great job as a babysitter all those years ago, Really good.
You can see that for sure.
On this episode 7, Bob Phillips sent us in some feedback. He says, I didn't expect that turn over Starlight, any of them, or indeed the cookery class. And I also don't believe that baby lived for 10 seconds. My best seven moment is the Deep getting an unusual taste of his own medicine, a brief scene, but one which made everybody crawl.
Yeah, a really good scene. I mean, it is, that lady is probing his gills in a way that he presumably has probed other people and dominated them. So it really is... it's kind of tough to watch, yet you do realize there is an inherent, would I say justice? I don't know, but it's, you get what you give kind of thing. And, he's having it back in spades, really. And it's a tough one to watch, but I think it's really good that the show does this. I have to say, hats off.
Absolutely. Bob continues, his best boys moment is Mallory. I admit I expected Mallory to be an older, white, straight bloke with thinning hair. She is the genesis of the boys, even if it's built on an honest untruth. As you probably heard from Chris's Corner in this episode, yeah, there is a very different character in the comic books, or a different person in the comic books. It is an older white male, exactly as you would expect. So, an interesting swap they've done for the show, and I really like the character. Yeah. Definitely want to see a lot more of Mallory in the future, though.
But I don't think she wants to see any of the boys again.
No more action for her, no, definitely.
Will she be disturbed again? Who knows?
Probably. Bob says his best other moment is Nakib. The plot to have Supe terrorists is unveiled, and we are left wondering, will the CIA go with the devils they know, or the deep green fireboy? Interesting. Yeah, I'm really excited to see the next episode and see what's happening on there. Bob has a question for Chris's Corner. He says, is the not good Dr. Scientist as unfeeling and evil as he is in the TV show? Chris has said it is slightly different in the books. He's going to go through some other bits that weren't in the comics in our final episode of the show, but he couldn't be here for the feedback for this episode. I'll try and see if there's anything that he can add to this if he hasn't added it at the end of the episode.
Yeah, that's Dr. Vogelbaum.
Yes.
Played by John Doman.
Yeah. So hopefully Chris will be able to cover that off in the next episode, in our final episode, the things that might be different from the comic books. He's not going to spoil anything about the comic books that you may want to read after watching this season, but just in case there's a couple of things that he might be able to cover off about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I kind of really took him as being detached and not so much evil, but just that kind of, Homelander ultimately, I suppose for him, is the lab rat. And yeah, that may be a little evil. Yeah, no, well, it is. But what I mean is that it seems certainly from this episode that you get the explanation from him why maybe he is detached or really not too interested in Homelander, because of all the people he's killed along the way. I mean, he does say in this episode, "You're my greatest failure." Yeah. So actually, maybe it's that detachment because he is his greatest failure. As a scientist, he wanted to go to the moon and said he kind of did go to the moon, but he created a psychotic space shuttle. That kills, kind of like Event Horizon, the ship that kills its passengers. So it's like, okay, not too great.
It's an interesting analogy, definitely.
Yes.
Thanks so much for the feedback, Dr. Bob.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bob.
Also in episode 7, Ray has some feedback about it as well. He says, another fantastic episode. Really enjoyed the subplot of the Deep. It's comical, but also that non-consensual encounter with the fan was so wrong and so right for all the wrong and right reasons. Violent episode, but it also has a lot of well-written plot threads and characters. I really think that kind of sums up the whole show. It's very violent, but also has some really well-written characters, A couple of people that we have in our group over on Facebook have said they're only watching The Boys because they've heard about it from us and heard about it from the coverage that we've done on other shows on TV Podcast Industries, and they're all really surprised and all really happy at the show itself because they looked at the ads for it and just thought it was going to be this violent, brutal show, and the actual characterizations throughout
it's brilliant.
So much heart, so much great acting, and so much great writing in it as well. There's good bits of comedy, good bits of action, and there's a good message going on as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the great thing about this series is that, just by purely playing against type, like with Homelander, like with Queen Maeve, against those superhero, I'm not going to say cliche is the wrong word, but those tropes, I suppose, in that sense. Playing against them automatically makes it, I think, really intriguing, really interesting. But the thing is, it is absolutely so much more because, like with Watchmen, it's looking at how that plays out. It's looking at it with this situation where it's not just the evil people that will ultimately kill or potentially maim or harm regular human beings, and it's very much that, it's almost like a bit with Marvel Civil War, whose side are you on?
Yeah.
It comes down to that a bit. It's this idea, are superheroes a menace or are they something that we should worship? And it's great because it just, there's so many layers in this. It plays out in a really punk way, I think, and I like that.
Absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned Watchmen, because it was on the tip of my tongue. That's exactly what I was going to talk about. In the same year that Watchmen is coming to TV as a TV show, you know, it has been made into a movie in the past. It started out its life as a comic book, and a massively well-respected comic book. Got turned into a movie that didn't go down too well with some people. They thought it was a bit overly long and a couple of changes they didn't like in it. Director's cut of that movie came out, and it's now well regarded within comic book movies as being one of the best. And now a TV show is being made out of that, set in a future with that as the backdrop to it. So it is going to be connected to Watchmen, but it is going to be an original work done by Damon Lindelof, who did Lost, who was very heavily involved in that, and did Leftovers for HBO. But it's going to be a much more serious show, you know, just like the Watchmen book. It's a very serious look at the world if superheroes were in there. This has taken that style of it and gone, it is quite a serious look, but there's also loads of comedy in there, and there's loads of fun to be had in there. So I'm wondering, will Watchmen, which we will be covering on TV Podcast Industries, hopefully, crossing fingers, will it suffer by comparison to The Boys, having gotten there in the same year, you know? It's a massive show that's coming up from HBO, who gave us Game of Thrones and given us loads and loads of shows. This came out of nowhere and really has been fantastic. The Boys on Amazon Prime, it's come out of nowhere and been one of the best shows we've seen on Amazon Prime.
It's almost like this is a more digestible form of that, for sure, because it touches maybe some lighter notes. It touches maybe more action orientated as well as violence and horror and so on. You know, I in some respects, I think that's it. Watchmen, for me, it was really at the essence of superheroes in terms of who watches the Watchmen, as the tagline goes. And I think there is an element of that here, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is, you know, the storyline is focusing. It is the same, don't get me wrong, but I do feel that there's a slightly different angle to it. But I agree. I'm hoping that the Watchmen really adds to this whole area of doing it. But I know what you mean. There's a risk. Definitely.
Absolutely. And remember, the Watchmen is massively different. It does come from Alan Moore's perspective. He's a very political guy. He was talking about political systems throughout the US and the UK during the time he wrote it in the 80s. Those kind of political systems have changed over the years. This is a show set in a more contemporary time than the original Watchmen was. So I'm intrigued to see if he's actually if the show at least is going to be much more serious and much more political. Is it going to be HBO's Handmaid's Tale for superheroes kind of thing? I
mean, the original comic, in a sense, is a bit of a period piece now, because not in terms of its main thrust, but, you know, it does talk about commercialization of superheroes with toys and all that. The Boys just ramps that up to another level. Exactly. This is in the era of effectively Marvel, Disney, you know, Star Wars, all these things that are dominating sort of cultural, commercial life
so
in the entertainment industry. And, you know, DC on the other side. And there's a question over that, you know? So yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think
it is massively interesting, but we will have loads to say about Watchmen when it comes out on the 20th of October, just announced this week as well. So I don't let it spoil all of our thoughts on Watchmen. Really enjoying The Boys. It's definitely a different take than what I thought it was going to be when it started out. I'm glad so many people have jumped on board and are enjoying it as much as Ray and as much as Bob and everybody else that's sending in feedback to us as well. Our final piece of feedback is a voicemail from Steve Brown.
Hello, TV Podcast Industries. This is Steve, and I sort of got behind on watching, and so I'm not sure if this is going to make it in before you record for episode 7. I'm fixing to watch episode 8 again and send in some notes for that, but wanted to get something quick in for episode 7 of The Boys. And this is the first episode I noticed that on the back of Billy's jacket, there's like a piece of tape. Looks like it might be covering up a bullet hole. That was an interesting the costume there. And just how pathetic is the Deep. I knew as soon as he started talking to the lobster and he asked the guy to take it out of the tank, I just knew, oh, that guy's going to kill that lobster. So that was, I mean, actually laughing as pathetic as it. He's just a pathetic guy. And Billy taking Raynor's deal and then her trying to blackmail Sitwell into stopping the whole Supe's going into the military thing is, all ramping us up to the last episode where we're going to wrap up the season and set up for next season, hopefully. Can't wait to hear what you guys thought. Talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you so much, Steve, for that. The talking to the lobster I thought was classic. I think, like Ray said previously, his storyline, The Deep, is kind of both. It has a justice to it, but it's also deeply tragic. And I think him talking to the lobster and ultimately it being killed. I think as well, as he's walking past the fish counter and all the fish are sort of dead on ice, but they look like they're swimming with him. I thought it was really classy, kind of bit of, scene setting here. Thought it was really nice. The leveraging or the attempted leverage by Rayna of Stillwell going horribly wrong. You kind of think just when they probably had the protection of the CIA, then you have the moment where super terrorists really bring it home for Vought International.
Yeah, exactly. I always call her Sitwell when I'm writing my notes because of Jasper Sitwell from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I always write down Sitwell. Exactly. I have to change it and amend it all the time. Really good feedback. Thanks so much for your voicemail, Steve. I know we have one in the bag for you for episode 8 as well. So thanks so much for sending in all that feedback. Back to us in the past to close out the podcast.
Bye.
Thank you so much for all that feedback. Don't forget, if you'd like to leave us a voicemail with your thoughts, you can go over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com and leave us your old dulcet tones there. Or if you're more of an email person, don't forget you can send us your feedback at tvpodcastindustries.com. Or don't forget we're over on Twitter at tvpodindustries.
Absolutely. Make sure you get in any of your thoughts about the entire series to us. We've got one episode left of the show. We want to get any thoughts that you have in before our final episode, before we record it, and before we put it out next Wednesday. Looking forward to that final episode. There's been so much going on in this episode that it's just shocking to think we only have one more to go. Really looking forward to that. Thanks so much for joining us.
Don't forget, we'd love you to subscribe at tvpodcastindustries.com, and you can write us a review on Apple Podcasts and share the love by sharing this podcast. We'll be back with our review of The Boys Season 1 finale, Episode 8, You Found Me, next Wednesday. So from me, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much for joining us. Talk to you next time.
Yeah, as always, boys and girls, it's a pleasure speaking with you. For $75 per DM, I'm off to Sandusky, Ohio. I'm going to go and rescue some stranded fishes and crustaceans. But after my fish and chips and a nice crab fest, I'll be back to speak with you again soon. Bye.
I can't believe you go all the way to Sandusky to rub it in the Deep's face and eat fish in front of him. That's so horrible.
Crab fest.
Terrible. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.